Well, there's two categories of folks that you outline that worry about or highlight the risks of AI, and you highlight a bunch of different risks. I would love to go through those risks and just discuss them, brainstorm which ones are serious and which ones are less serious. But first, the Baptists and the bootleggers. What are these two interesting groups of folks who who worry about the effect of AI on human civilization?
Or say they do.
Say oh, okay. Yes, I'll say they do.
The Baptists worry, the bootleggers say they do.
Yeah.
So the Baptists and the bootleggers is a metaphor from economics, from what's called development economics. And it's this observation that when you get social reform movements in a society, you tend to get two sets of people showing up arguing for the social reform. And the term Baptists and bootleggers comes from the American experience with alcohol prohibition. Mm-hmm. And so in the 1900s, 1910s, there was this movement that was very passionate at the time, which basically said alcohol is evil and it's destroying society. By the way, there was a lot of evidence to support this. There were very high rates of very high correlations then, by the way, and now between rates of physical violence and alcohol use. Almost all violent crimes have either the perpetrator or the victim or both drunk. Almost all, if you see this actually in the work, almost all sexual harassment cases in the workplace, it's like at a company party and somebody's drunk. Like it's amazing how often alcohol actually correlates to actually dysfunction. It leads to domestic abuse and so forth, child abuse. And so you had this group of people who were like, okay, this is bad stuff and we should outlaw it. And those were quite literally Baptists. Those were super committed, hardcore Christian activists in a lot of cases. There was this woman whose name was Carrie Nation, who was this older woman who had been in this, disastrous marriage or something. And her husband had been abusive and drunk all the time. And she became the icon of the Baptist prohibitionists. And she was legendary in that era for carrying an axe and doing, completely on her own, doing raids of saloons and like taking her axe to all the bottles and kegs in the back. And so
a true believer,
an absolute true believer, and with absolutely the purest of intentions. And again, there's a very important thing here, which is you could look at this cynically and you could say the Baptists are like delusional, extremists, but you could also say, look, they're right. Like she was, she had a point. Yep. Like she wasn't wrong about a lot of what she said.
Yep.
But it turns out, the way the story goes is it turns out that there were another set of people who very badly wanted to outlaw alcohol in those days, and those were the bootleggers, which was organized crime that stood to make a huge amount of money if legal alcohol sales were banned. And this was, in fact, the way the history goes, is this was actually the beginning of organized crime in the U.S. This was the big economic opportunity that opened that up. And so they went in together, and they didn't go in together. Like the Baptists did not even necessarily know about the bootleggers because they were on their moral crusade. The bootleggers certainly knew about the Baptists, and they were like, "Wow, these people are like the great front people for like,
it's good PR
shenanigans in the background."
Yeah,
and they got the Volstead Act passed. Right. And they did, in fact, ban alcohol in the U.S. And you'll notice what happened, which is people kept drinking. Mm-hmm. It didn't work. People kept drinking. The bootleggers made a tremendous amount of money. And then over time, it became clear that it made no sense to make it illegal and it was causing more problems. And so then it was revoked. And here we sit with legal alcohol 100 years later with all the same problems. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing was this like giant misadventure. The Baptists got taken advantage of by the bootleggers, and the bootleggers got what they wanted. And that was that.
The same two categories of folks are now sort of suggesting that the development of artificial intelligence should be regulated.
100%. Yeah, it's the same pattern. And the economists will tell you it's the same pattern every time. Like, this is what happened with nuclear power. This is what happened, which is another interesting one. But like, yeah, this happens dozens and dozens of times throughout the last 100 years. And this is what's happening now.